Making It Work. My name is Allison McCann, and I'm the Vice President of Business Development for the Portland Press Herald. I thank you for joining us today. This has been an interesting and challenging year, but I'm glad we've been able to continue to gather, albeit differently, to try and work through some of those challenges and learn from one another. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. And if you'd like to catch up on any previous sessions, you can go to pressherald.com/events and see all of the other event recordings. Before we begin, I'd like to extend our gratitude to our Making It Work sponsors. They are Cross Insurance, Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, Katahdin Trust Company, and MEMIC. And now I'd like to introduce the Vice President of External Communications at MEMIC, Tony Payne. Tony?
Welcome, everybody, and thank you for tuning in. Special thanks not only to a very highly qualified panel of experts today, but also to the Press Herald for making sure that our small business owners across the state have access to the kind of information you need in order to succeed. One of the things that we do at MEMIC, which is the state's workers' comp provider, in fact, we have about 2/3 of the market in Maine, so we've got a big stake in your success, is to really underscore every single day that your workforce, whether they're in the office, in the field, or at home, are safe. And I just recount quickly, I put my dog out on the deck this past week with the first frost, and it was like watching a giraffe skating. It was not a pretty sight. And one of the things that it reminds us is put into your budgets for 2021 and the end of this year as much sand, salt, and shoveling that you can, because we need you all to be safe wherever you are, and make sure that you stay that way until spring arrives. So enjoy your panel today. And again, we're very proud to be a sponsor of Making It Work.
Thank you, Tony. That is quite a reminder of how quickly the seasons are changing on us as we are, even while we're home. But now to hand things over to our special projects editor, Carol Coultas. Carol?
There we go. Thanks, Allie. And welcome, everyone. We're delighted that you could be here today. As Allie said, 2020 has been a year like no other. And I think when the pandemic struck in the middle of March and the economy closed down, businesses scrambled. And that meant different things for different businesses. Some of them established remote workforces, others embraced foreign and unfamiliar technology, and others just had to hit pause, hoping that businesses would soon be able, the economy would soon be able to reopen, and we could get back to business as usual. I think it's safe to say that business has just been nose to the grindstone for the last 7 months. And I think that's particularly true for small businesses that may not have the deeper pockets or the internal resources that bigger companies have. So to that end, we wanted to put together a webinar to help smaller businesses just sort of take a self-assessment. Where are you and what do you need to do to finish the year as strong as you can, and make yourself and put yourself in the best possible situation to start 2021. A lot of businesses availed themselves of the PPP loans, and we had a lot of questions when people registered for this event about those loans. And we will get to those in just a few minutes. But there are, a really remarkable there's remarkable depth and variety of resources available to small businesses within the state of Maine. I'll give you just 2 quick examples. I don't know if you're aware that the Small Business Development Centers make available $5,000 grants for businesses with 5 or fewer employees, or that CEI, Coastal Enterprises, has a program they called Wicked Fast Loans. And you can apply for a loan of up to $25,000. It's a simple application process, and you get your answer in 3 days. So those are that's just a little taste of some of the resources that are out there. For business owners, small business owners in particular, there are going to be a lot of difficult questions you have to answer, and some challenging decisions that you need to make. But the good news is you don't have to do it alone. We have people here with our panel today representing some wonderful organizations who make their business assistance programs available for free and are ready to give you a hand. So that said, let me quickly introduce everyone. Also, you should know we do record our Zoom webinars. We post them on the events landing page. Some of our panelists have PDFs or some talking points. We will put those on the landing page with live links as well. So you don't have to take notes. You just have to pay attention for the next 45 minutes or so. And hopefully you'll be able to walk away with some good advice that will help you end the year as strong as you can. So that said, let me briefly introduce our panelists. Their expanded bios are on the event landing page, but quickly, let me just introduce you to Dan Gayer. He's a senior manager in the tax practice at Baker, Newman, and Noyes, one of Maine's biggest CPA and business consulting firms. Dan has deep expertise in compliance and tax matters, and he's the guy who's going to try to answer those PPP loan questions. We also have Steve Veazey. He's the Maine District Director for SCORE. I can't imagine I have to tell you what SCORE is. They've been around for a really long time, but they have been providing mentorship opportunities for Maine's business community for a long time. And Steve is the statewide director. He has more than 20 years of business experience, plus another 10 as a CPA. So if you haven't checked out SCORE, you really should. Also joining us today is Mark Delisle. He is the state director for the Maine Small Business Development Centers, which has existed also for decades. The organization offers a lot of programming, grant information for small businesses. And he has been with SBDC since 2008 after a career in retail and the arts. And then Sarah Guerette, she is the director and a senior business advisor for Coastal Enterprises, Inc. She runs the Women's Business Center at CEI and provides technical assistance to new and existing small businesses with a focus on women-owned businesses. So that's our panel. These are people with a lot of just a lot of expertise, a wealth of knowledge, and they're here to share today. So we're going to have a conversation for about 30 or 40 minutes, and then we will open it up to the two questions from the audience for the last few minutes of our program today. So to get things rolling, Steve, I'm going to ask you first. Can you talk about what people should be thinking of, how they can understand what their business's financial health is right now so that they can have a realistic plan and actionable steps they can take now in order to make themselves more successful in 2021. Take it away, Steve.
All right. Thank you very much, Carol. And thank you to the Portland Press Herald for having me today. So as the year draws to a close, there are several things that you can do. There are several things that you can do for the financial health of your business, and this will be kind of a mixture of things that you can do in closing out the current year and in looking ahead to the next year. So are you going to put up the slide? That would be helpful. So this looks like a relatively short list, but you'll really need some planning time to accomplish all of this. So one of the first things you should do is prepare an income statement for 2020 compared to last year and compared to plan. And then do some analysis of that income statement. So things like, what are the sources for 80% of your sales? And we're all familiar with the 80-20 rule. Those are the things you should focus on. Where do they come from and what'll happen next year? Are your sales and marketing expenses as you expected? And if not, why not? Which overhead expenses materially changed from what they were the prior year and why? And importantly, are you satisfied with the amount available from your business for owner's draw or compensation? So unless you're operating a hobby business, this is really important to you. So the next thing you should do is analyze your gross margin. This is the most important thing on your income statement. So why is your gross margin changed? Is it up or down? And why is it changed? And will it continue into the new year? What do you need to do differently? Are you able to determine your gross margin by line of business? So lines of business are all contributing to your overhead and profits at different rates, and they're not all equal. So you really need to figure out which are the strongest contributors and try to exploit those. And if maybe you have some losers that you need to either cut back or discontinue. So look at things on a line of business basis. You should prepare a balance sheet, and a balance sheet is a summary of what you own, what you owe, and your owner's equity. So when on the balance sheet, some things to look at are your accounts receivable. Are they current? Have you left money on the table because you haven't collected from customers? Have you contributed assets to the business that are not on the books? Do you need to do a year-end physical inventory? And then how are your PPP loan proceeds recorded? Are they in your revenues or in your debt? So looking ahead, you should set 2 or 3 specific, realistically achievable goals for 2021. And these need to be supported by tactics so that they're not just a hope and a prayer. You'll then need some marketing plans to figure out how you're going to meet those goals. You need to look at your staffing needs in meeting those goals. And that segues to another very important topic on this list, which is assessing employee availability and capability. It's not as easy to hire employees these days. And many businesses have lost some employees because of the coronavirus, or high-risk people are unwilling to return to work, or maybe some people are facing childcare needs and homeschooling requirements that don't allow them to return to work. And then lastly, do you have the employees with the right mix of capabilities to support what you want to do? So if you need to hire people, you need to develop a plan around how you're going to do that, when you're going to do it, and so forth. You should prepare a revenue and expense projection that you anticipate in 2021. So your sales, your gross margin, all your various expenses, and of course, the owner's draw. Is it going to be sufficient to meet your personal needs? You also need to focus on your, excuse me, upcoming debt obligations and other payment obligations like leases or taxes or inventory that you need to stock up on to run your business, or expansion plans. And lastly, you need to determine if there's additional capital that's going to be required. You need to figure out a source for that, the timing. You're going to need a business plan and some financial projections to support getting that additional capital. So there's a lot to do here in this list, this short list of things to do. But I think Carol mentioned it. One thing you should do is reach out for assistance. You don't need to go it alone. There's help available to get you through this short list of tasks to prepare for next year.
So
Carol?
Steve, let me ask you, are you advising your mentees, the people you're helping, are you advising that it's going to be pretty much status quo until the first half of 2021? I've heard that anecdotally, that people are saying until there's a widely available vaccine, we're going to just sort of stay the course we're on right now. And as people are working on these plans for 2021, are you giving any sort of guidance about, when we think the economy may rebound to its pre-pandemic stage?
That's a pretty dicey area. Is
So
predicting when. So yes, we are advising clients that for the foreseeable future, at least for the next several months, probably into the first half of next year, it will be kind of similar to where we're at now, but subject to change as the virus situation changes and as Congress adapts their programs to, additional needs. So it's really important to kind of take a good look at your business and figure out what you need to do to be financially strong enough to survive this period when it's not business as usual.
Good, thank you. Dan, can you pick the ball up? Can you talk about some of the tax things people should be thinking of between now and the end of the year? In particular, your advice around the PPP loans and for businesses that receive those and now want to have them forgiven. So to you, Dan. Oh, do we have?
Sure. You have to run through some quick thoughts on things to be thinking of at year end for tax planning ideas here. The first thing, I will get to PPP loans. I wanted to quickly run through a couple of other topics. The first one to mention is, certainly understand this has been a tough year for a lot of businesses, and the change happened very quickly. So you may all of a sudden be finding yourself in a loss position where you've historically, up until early March of this year, been very profitable in the last few years. And one of the many changes of the CARES Act that was passed earlier this year in response to the COVID pandemic was an increased ability to generate and deduct losses. So if you have losses already, you may be able to increase those on paper by taking advantage of accelerated depreciation. If you purchased fixed assets, machinery, equipment, furniture, or if you improved property, you're still investing, making capital investments in your business despite a tough year. There's a greatly expanded ability to write off 100% of those costs for tax purposes this year to bulk up a loss, to either create a loss or increase a loss that you might already have. And the other change brought about by the CARES Act is that you can now carry back those net operating losses up to 5 years. So if you had losses in 18, 19, or 20, you can now carry those back, including to years before 2017, pre the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, an era where the tax rates were significantly higher for business owners than they are right now. So you will be able to get refunds of taxes you paid in those years, a bit of a silver lining, and a source of cash flow to look forward to at some point in the future. Caution there is that the IRS, like everyone else, has been pretty seriously impacted by COVID. Their ability to process regular tax returns has been slowed significantly, and their ability to process anything more complicated or out of the ordinary, like an amended return or application for refund based on a net operating loss, those are taking months to process. So if this is something you think might apply to you, you think you're looking at a taxable loss, I'd suggest talk to your tax accountants now, have a plan to get your 2020 tax returns done as soon as possible, and go ahead and get either your amended return or claim for refund filed as quickly as you can to get the process going, because there may be cash out there available to you, but it's likely to take quite a long time before you actually receive those funds. Another thing to mention, there's been some talk in recent months about payroll tax deferrals. Those, the president, I think, put out some guidance in August saying that there was going to be deferral of payroll taxes, and then there were some additional a revenue procedure issued by the IRS to allow for a deferral of employee taxes. There's a separate deferral available for employer taxes. I wanted to highlight quickly that these are deferrals. They are not eliminations. These taxes will still be due. In the case of employees, they can defer taxes between, I believe it was between September 1st and the end of the year, but those taxes all of a sudden need to be repaid during primarily the first quarter of 2021, which would mean an effective doubling of the employee's payroll tax rate in the first part of next year. So my advice there is proceed with extreme caution, especially on the employee side, because there are a lot of pitfalls for you. And in most cases, after weighing pros and cons with my clients, we advise them this is not a good idea. Continue to Treat your payroll taxes as you normally do. As many of you business owners probably experience with, the U.S. payroll tax system is complex. It tends to function very well as long as you don't rock the boat. But the minute you try to do something at all out of the ordinary or change things, it becomes very complex and it's very difficult to fix what should be simple problems. So I don't advise you doing that unless there's a really strong case to so. One other thing I want to mention before we get into the meat of PPP loans, there's another opportunity brought about by the CARES Act. Normally, if you take an early distribution from a retirement account, there's a 10% penalty on that. And you also have to pay income taxes because those retirement distributions from previously untaxed income are still considered taxable income. Under the CARES Act, if the necessity arises due to COVID for a broadly defined array of reasons, you can take a penalty-free distribution of up to $100,000, and there's no 10% penalty, and the income tax due can be paid over a period of 3 years. Again here, strong word of caution. I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm quite confident any financial advisor you ever talked to would tell you early distributions from a retirement account are one of the worst financial planning decisions you can ever make. So unless you're in a situation of, it's the life or death of my business, and this 50 or 100,000 could mean the difference between surviving the pandemic with a functioning business or not, I advise think long and hard about doing this. But if you feel that you have to, it's an option, something on the table to be considered. Moving on towards PPP loans, these were by far the most popular and most powerful tool brought about by the CARES Act and expanded by additional legislation during the course of this summer to allow small businesses to survive and respond, keep their employees paid if their business was reduced or they were forced to close, and really ride out this storm and still be alive and able to resume business when conditions allow. Now that most of those loans have been made, the question is, how do we get these loans forgiven? And there are a lot of open questions about this, and as sort of exemplified by the fact that just within the last week and a half, the SBA came out with a new form, Form 3508S, which is a simplified forgiveness application form for smaller loans of $50,000 or less, which I believe would encompass a wide range of smaller Maine businesses. So if that applies to you, definitely take a look at that form, talk with your tax and accounting advisors about the process, because that's a much simpler application than the original Form 3508 or the Form 3508EZ, which says it's easy, but is in fact still quite complicated to get forgiveness of those loans. The covered period for the covered period on which the forgiveness of these loans is based has been expanded from 8 to 24 weeks. Originally, when these loans were first introduced, the loan amount was calculated based on a period of 8 weeks, and the forgiveness, the period that you would have to spend the loan proceeds on qualifying costs was also 8 weeks. That amount was extended to 24 weeks, which means that unless you have reduced your head count, which triggers a separate set of calculations that might reduce proportionally the amount of loan that you're eligible to have forgiven, using the 24-week period, I would expect the vast majority of businesses can come up with enough costs during a 24-week period that they spent on qualifying payroll, rent, utility expenses, that they should be able to get their loan forgiven. But saying it is simple, actually getting it done is much more complicated. So you should certainly be considering now what your records are available and making sure you have documentation that within the 8 or 20-week period you're using, you did in fact spend the proceeds on qualified expenses, and you have the documents to prove it. So when it comes to filing the application, you've got the raw material on hand you need to produce and file a successful application for forgiveness. On the timing of the applications, generally speaking, you receive the loan proceeds, then you start your covered period of 8 or 24 weeks. Once that covered period ends, you have 10 months to file the application for forgiveness, which can quickly carry you well into 2021. And once you file the application for forgiveness, there is I believe it's a 60-day period for your lender to review the application, and then up to a 90-day period, so a total of 150 days for the SBA to approve that application and then remit the funds to your lender. So the lender actually gets paid not by you, but by the SBA. So they're made whole. And it's not until those funds are actually remitted by the SBA to the lender that your loan is truly considered forgiven. So this is a long process and could extend well into 2021, and depending on timing, potentially even farther before this actual loan forgiveness is accomplished. So there's some significant timing hurdles here. There also are real questions of, when do you want to apply? Maybe your covered period is done now, you're getting into late 2020. You've always kept good records for your business, you have all the information you need to file the application, but do you want to? That's really a big question, as there's a lot of legislative interest in simplifying further the application process. We just saw this new form 3508S come out, which provided a simplified process for people with 50,000 or less of loans. There's a lot of interest out there in simplifying the process yet more for, I've heard of a number of a loan of 150,000 or less, which I think would cover a lot more of Maine PPP loan recipients, of simplifying the application further, potentially doing away with the application altogether, and just acknowledging that the SBA doesn't want to review many of these small loans. They don't have the capacity to review it, and they're just going to let it go and say if your loan is below a certain threshold, it's forgiven, no work done, no questions asked. You have to keep the records in case we ever audit you, but we're not going to force you to apply. That's something, there's a lot of support for that. It hasn't happened. Depends on the whims of the legislative process, so who knows? But if you're currently in the position of, I could apply now, but my 10-month period runs well into 2021, maybe you want to just hold your records together, but sit tight and wait, see what happens. We've got an election, there's going to be a new Congress, probably not a lot's going to happen until sometime into November once the election's decided, but after that, who knows? So there's a lot to think about as you look at year-end planning. I guess I'll stop there for now. See if we have any other questions.
So Dan, I just have two quick follow-ups. One is, if you've already submitted your application for forgiveness and you fall in that 50,000 or less, should you fill out the new shorter form, or should you just let the original application that you submitted ride? What would you suggest?
I think if you've already submitted an application based on the forms that were available at the time, since this new form is so recent, then I think you just let it ride. It's very much, all of the guidance that we've seen about these applications makes it very clear this is intended to be a collaborative process between you and your lender and the SBA. This isn't an adversarial situation. We're all on the same side here. So I think it would be very appropriate for you to pick up the phone, call your lender, someone you've got a relationship, and say, hey, I saw this new application form come out. I know we filed under the old form. Where are you at in the process? And are you reviewing our application? And if you filed a complete application under the prior form, you provided more information than you would have to, but it should be complete. So you shouldn't have to do anything else. But definitely an opportunity to reach out to your lender, have a discussion, and see where their heads are at in the process, because this is really still an evolving situation, for your lenders, for the SBA, just as much as it is for Maine businesses who are trying to figure this out.
And so if the SBA would consider forgiving the loans without having the businesses filing applications, just to avoid the bureaucratic red tape and headache that would create. Is that a decision that has to be endorsed by Congress, or is that something that can be done through an executive order? Do you know?
I'm sorry, I think you cut out there for a second.
Oh, sorry. Who gets to make the decision about the SBA and whether it can just forgive the loans without having people file those applications? Does that have to be an act of Congress, or can the president do that through an executive order?
That's a question. I don't know the answer. I know the revised and simplified forms that have been issued, I think that was done at the discretion of the SBA. I don't require an act of Congress to do. I do not know whether the SBA, a new president or President Trump acting on their own, would have the authority by executive order to say, we're going to forgive these loans, no questions asked, or if that would require an act of Congress.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. A lot of good information there. Mark, can you tell us about the most relevant programs that the SBDC offers right now to help small businesses navigate the pandemic or end the year as strong as they possibly can?
Sure. Thanks, Carol. And thanks for pulling us all together today for this panel. I appreciate it, the time. So quickly, the Small Business Development Center is an organization, I think, as Carol said when she introduced it, it's been around for over 40 years, and we provide one-on-one business advising for people that want to start a new small business or already are operating a small business. We provide that through a staff of full-time paid business advisors who work with you one-on-one in a completely confidential format to help you do that. We're delivering all of our services virtually, and we're actually working with far more clients since the middle of March than we would normally work with in the course of a year. In some ways, the virtual environment has been faster and more productive for both our clients and for our advisors because it's very fast and easy. We don't have to schedule meetings in person and go to offices and things like that. So we've been literally meeting with thousands of clients since this pandemic started, and since we've had this economic impact hit the state of Maine and across the country. And as everyone knows, Maine is really a small business state. We are just, that's how our economy runs. So we really shifted our focus right in the middle of March as an organization to focus on in-business, small businesses, to try to help them figure out how to weather this storm and how to survive the economic impact of the pandemic. It's very, very challenging. I think the national statistic is that most small businesses have about 2 weeks worth of cash in the bank. It's pretty much cash in, cash out is how small businesses run. I've run one myself, and I can speak to that. So it's very challenging if you're shut down for a period of time and then have limited phased in reopening. So we've really been working with a lot of clients to do that and try to figure out a way to survive. Our goal is to make sure as many small businesses are sustainable and survive. We asked in the beginning, how long do we think before we get back to an economy like we had in January of this year? And most people are saying it's going to be literally years for that level of economy to come back. So it's going to be challenging for all the small businesses. So resources that are available. We received some additional funding through the CARES Act at the Small Business Development Center, and through those resources, we've got a variety of things going on. We've added advisors to our network and our staff, so we have additional advisors available to take on additional client flow and one-on-one meetings. Some of those have specific expertise in exporting in the food system area and a lot of different areas of expertise. We're also bringing in a series of contract advisors to work with us on a part-time basis, bringing in-depth expertise in digital marketing, restaurants, hospitality businesses, manufacturing, maybe marketing, maybe finance, those kinds of experts. We'll be bringing those people on board soon as well. We've brought on some new tools so that we can provide clients additional marketing data. Most of the market data that we had in January, February is now worthless for a client. So we really have to be looking at what's the market like today if you're going to either start your business, and there are actually a lot of people looking to start businesses in this economy. It provides some opportunities, surprisingly, but also people that have a business, they need market data to understand what's the impact then on the market. So we have these new tools as well. And I'm happy to also talk about this Recovery and Relaunch Resource Center, which is going to be launching next week. This is going to be a digital resource center with a lot of additional tools there, a lot of additional information for businesses to access, either information specific to their type of business or information around the areas of finance, marketing, hiring employees. We have a whole different environment now for managing employees, safety concerns for your customers and your clients. So a lot of additional information through this Recovery and Relaunch Center that we'll have launching next week as well. We have a whole series of webinars. I encourage everybody to look at the webinars that we have listed coming up. Those are all free of charge as well for different specific areas. And we're developing a whole suite of online e-learning modules as well for small businesses. And those will be launching over the course of the next 6 months on writing your business plan, financials, marketing, and really how to kind of adapt yourself to a new world, right? So nobody's business plan or business model from January, February is worth the paper that you printed it on today. So you've got to really, kind of building on what Steve and Dan were both saying, you've got to really kind of take a look at your new operating reality. And that's what we're really encouraging all of our clients to do, is to look at their new operating reality. What's the economy look like? What's their revenue look like? And how do they really think creatively about how to operate their business now? You can't operate it the same way you did prior to the pandemic. There are a whole host of resources, and Carrie, you touched on this in the beginning of the panel, a whole host of resources out there. A few of us are here today on this panel, but there are a lot more on government contracting, manufacturing, and Lean Six Sigma for your manufacturing operation, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things we're going to do at the Small Business Development Center is put together a team-based response for you so that we can bring those resources to bear very quickly. Another advantage of this virtual format is that we can pull, hopefully, some additional expertise and resources into one meeting very quickly, not have to worry about the logistics of scheduling an in-person session for that. So we are going to be doing these tailored response teams, if you will, kind of rapid response teams, so we can find out exactly what you need as a small business, and we can try to bring the right resources to bear for that. So a lot of tools, and we said this in the beginning too, you know, there's a lot of help out there. So please reach out and work with any of our programs and resources, whether it's the SCORE program, our program, and other resource partners. There is a lot of help out there. We have a lot of great resources for small businesses. And I'm hoping that the statistic says in 2021 that Maine saved the most small businesses of any state in the country. That's our goal, is that we have the most small businesses still operating and not closing, because unfortunately the statistics are pretty grim in terms of how many aren't making it even now. So hopefully we'll be able to get out and reach as many people as possible. And like we said, you can tap into this expertise and these resources and take advantage of it.
Wow, that's terrific. So we can provide a live link to your resource and recovery site next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're looking at probably a Tuesday or Wednesday launch. There'll be a press release. It'll be in our newsletter. It's a section of our existing website. So yeah, you'll be able to see it. It'll be linked right off our homepage on our website.
Okay. And just so folks know, how do you define small business? Like what's the cutoff point for eligibility?
Yep. Great question. So the Small Business Administration, and that's what we're all partners of the Small Business Administration, federal partners of those, of the SBA. The SBA defines a small business as having 500 employees or fewer. So as you can imagine, that's a pretty wide net here in Maine. So yeah, it's pretty much all except for a handful of businesses. Anybody that's running a business with less than 500 employees would qualify as a small business.
Great. It's good to hear that you're really amping up your advisors and your staffing too. It's certainly, I think it's a needed resource during these really difficult times for small businesses. So that's terrific.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yes. So Sarah, tell us about CEI and what are some of the most relevant resources you can offer to small businesses as we're trying to navigate this pandemic and come out on the other side healthy and viable.
For sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm just reflecting on this conversation around status quo and new operating reality, and realizing that the businesses that we are working with are pivoting, by the moment. And this is exhausting. So if you're a small business owner and you're here today, giving us a little bit of your precious time and energy, thank you. It's nice to have you here as part of this conversation. CEI is a mission-based lender and investor, and we work to create an economy that works for everyone. So we have a host of programs that offer business advising, lending, investing, sector-specific expertise in food systems and fisheries, and we do a lot of policy work around these issues, including subsidiaries. We are a staff of about 75 throughout the state, and I'm going to highlight 4 programs at CEI that might be particularly relevant right now. So one is our workshops. We know that now more than ever, connection is key, and that many entrepreneurs are feeling particularly isolated, as are many of us generally. So a lot of our workshops are cohort-based and really aim to build skills, but also connections among entrepreneurs, as peers can be so helpful as a resource to one another. So those programs range from our facilitated peer groups, our Focus Me program. We have a program called Propeller that is for women looking to start a tech-based program or add a tech component to their business, which is increasingly important right now. We also have a series called Pints and Policy, which gives female entrepreneurs a voice and a chance to elevate their role in policy matters. Certainly policy is a topic that is on lots of people's minds right now. In addition to those workshops and so many more, we have a workforce solutions team. So staffing has come up a couple times today in the conversation previously. And our workforce solutions teams help businesses think about employee retention and policies in the wake of COVID-19. So that might include how to select workers and bring them back as you ramp up, including new health and safety policies in your employee practices, dealing with some of the new rules and regulations that have come out, the COVID federal sick pay leave law, the federal emergency paid leave law. So we have resources and workshops around all of those things. We're also advising clients on how to prepare for Maine's new earned paid leave law. Not necessarily COVID specific, but a change that is coming up and something that I think will be especially critical given the moment in time that we're in. We're also working with clients and small businesses to prepare for the minimum wage increase happening in January. So all examples where our workforce team can help you take a deeper dive on any of those topics. Third is our small business lending team. So we do a variety of small business lending at CEI and can often be a little bit more traditional than or a little bit more flexible than a traditional lender might be. Our team of business advisors help small businesses get financing both at CEI and of course with other lenders throughout our community. Carol did mention our Wicked Fast Loan product. That is really meant to be an answer for a need for quick, smaller loans and keep folks away from predatory lenders and credit cards. It's up to $25,000, 3-day decision, really easy application. Just one of our loan products at CEI, but can be a great resource. And finally, our financial development services team. So we know that small business financials are hugely impactful on personal financials. And we have a team that can help develop personal financial literacy, offer free confidential credit counseling, as well as how to navigate assistance around mortgage delinquency, eviction concerns. This is a pretty dire place to end my spiel of 4 ways that we can help, but certainly these personal financial topics are really coming into play right now, and we can help navigate resources and help folks navigate that landscape probably much easier than doing it by themselves.
That's terrific. Thank you. And I think you're right. For a lot of small business operators in the state of Maine, personal income and commercial income are pretty much one and the same. And so having these additional resources, I think, is a really important, it's important to get people aware of those resources that they can avail themselves of. In my conversations with people, with our panelists before, a couple of you mentioned just sort of some general things to be on top of for business as you close out 2020. One of those things is that it can take a lot longer now to get a loan approved through your bank, that the conventional process has taken on some additional time because lenders are just being more cautious because of all the uncertainty in the economy right now. Would any of you like to either expound on that, or are there other sort of general issues that people should be sort of top of mind as to help business operators figure out how to end this year as healthy as they can and what to be ready for in 2021?
Yeah, I'll jump back in here. It is always taking a fair amount of time to work with a lender to get through the process of application and underwriting and approval. And now it's a bit longer. So businesses just need to, um, you know, work with their advisors to get prepared, and then they need to start the process sooner. You can't start today and expect that you're going to get the money when you need it next week.
And I would just add to that, a change that I'm seeing in addition to timeline is a desire for more data and more information on behalf of the lenders. So whereas previously perhaps we could submit a business plan with some projected financials based on a comparable business or someone's prior experience, lenders are really now kind of poking and prodding about, how do you know you're going to make those numbers, and what's your backup plan? And tell me very specifically how your business is addressing COVID. So adding that level of detail to business plans so that a lender or a funder knows that the business is in fact dealing with this crisis face on is increasingly important.
Wow, that's really good advice. Anyone else? Dan or Mark, do you have something to offer just in terms of general advice as we go into 2021?
Sure. Yeah, and I would just emphasize what Sarah just said, which is, don't ignore COVID and the coronavirus response in your whole approach, whether you're approaching a lender for loans or just in your approach to the business. The number one piece of advice, I guess I would say, is it's about revenue. So you really need to, we're approaching a season where a lot of our businesses generate the bulk of their revenue. We already gone through what we had was a limited tourism season, but now we're hitting the holiday season. So you really need to think aggressively about how to hold up that revenue line. The top line is the most important line. So, how can you diversify your revenue? Can you do online purchasing? Can you do shipment? Can you expand curbside? Can you expand ways to sell more of your product or services? That's really where they need to be focused on. Is you need to generate that revenue for your business. So we would encourage everybody to really kind of step back and take a look at what the impacts have been from the coronavirus. But what can you provide to your customers? And we've seen those examples early in the pandemic of people turning their business around and making sanitizer products or masks or whatever they might be doing. But you got to even think more broadly than that and just think, if my business is going to survive, I have to find ways to generate more revenue for it, because I can't fill my store with customers the weekend after Thanksgiving.
And I just add to that, make sure you're really approaching this as a multi-year process. I recall fondly my thoughts when this thing started about, I'm being very broad-minded and realistic when I thought the world would be back to normal maybe by early June. And here we are in October with no end in sight. And I think, on the tax front, when you're looking at, preparing your year-end financials, getting your tax returns done, thinking about when you're going to file your forgiveness application, if maybe you're someone who historically put this stuff off and extended your returns, maybe you can still do that, but at least make sure you've done the financial work on your end, that you got your financials together and you're ready to go. You understand when you're planning to file a forgiveness application, file a tax return, get your documentation together for a forgiveness application, even if you might not be filing it for months yet. Really make sure that you've got your planning in place as soon as you can, because this is not, there are many open questions, there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's not going to go away now or next month, probably not even next year, at least not until later in the year. So really plan for this year and next year and the year after.
All good advice. Let's turn to questions now. I'm going to take one that was submitted by someone who registered for this webinar, and that is, if we're not able to get the forgiveness application, the PPP loan, forgiveness application processed or approved before the end of the year, how do we treat the loan? Do we estimate the amount to be forgiven and treat it as income, or do we carry the entire loan balance as a liability? I think a lot of people are curious about that.
Great question. First, I wanted to quickly go back to the question you asked earlier about who would have the authority to do a no application forgiveness of PPP loans. I took a quick look at the text of the CARES Act, and specified in the language is that there is a prohibition on forgiveness without documentation, and the need for an application is in the statute. So to remove that entirely, Congress would need to act. SBA could simplify the application or allow a broader range of borrowers to use a simplified form, but could not do away with it entirely without an act of Congress. Specifically to this question on what to do if your loan is not forgiven by the end of the year, the quick and honest answer is I don't know. It's an open question. There is no answer for it yet. I think from a sort of a strict interpretation of tax law, as I understand it, until you actually have your loan forgiven, it's not forgiven or forgivable loan until the application comes through. That means up to 10-month period for you to file a loan, 60 days for your bank to review it, and up to 90 days for the SBA to review it and then remit funds to your bank. So until you get to the end of that process, this is not a forgiven loan. And I think it should be carried on your books as an ordinary loan. If you're in a position of someone who actually prepares formal financial statements, like you have reviewed or audited financials, I think that's absolutely something to note in your financials. And if you're talking about your financials to anyone, whether it's lenders or someone else, potential investors, certainly note, here's this loan on the books. I intend to apply forgiveness. I have applied for forgiveness. Here's where we are in the process. It's not a forgiven loan until that is actually approved. Corollary to that is, do I still deduct those expenses on my tax return? That's also an open question. The position I would take based on information available right now is that if you are filing a 2020 tax return at some point in 2021 and your loan has not yet been forgiven, and we don't have additional legislation or other guidance on what to do with expenses paid with a potentially forgivable but not yet forgiven loan, I would still deduct those on your tax return, understanding that you might need to go back and amend your tax return, or there might be additional guidance that comes out later on to tell you what to do. But for right now, it's a great question, but it's one that does not have a clear answer.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Strawberry, we have some questions in the raise your hand queue.
Yes. So this one was submitted. Schedule C, draw and wages. Has the state passed a rule to say PPP isn't taxable like the federal government has done?
I don't really understand that question. Would Steve or Dan, you guys have the CPA backgrounds, can you address that?
I mean, I can quickly say, there is no potential taxable income. Sort of the income generating event is the forgiveness of the loan. So until you have a loan forgiven, there is no potential taxable income. And I don't know the answer of when that is forgiven, likely for most of you not until sometime in 2021, whether the state will follow federal treatment on that. Generally, the state does follow federal treatment on things, what is and is not taxable income from the forgiveness of debt. Most states do not have their own rules on that. They piggyback off the feds, but I do not know if Maine has yet specifically said how they're treating that. I can certainly look into that. I have to get back to you.
Great, thank you. And there's another question, Strawberry?
Yep, I have had 2 friends that were forced to close up shop. Do we have any idea the amount of businesses that did not survive this?
I can jump in on that. We don't know that that answer yet, but the SBDC is hosted at the University of Southern Maine, and the University of Southern Maine does have an area called the Center for Economic and Business Research, and that part of USM has gotten some funding from the federal government to do some analysis of the impact of the coronavirus on the economy. So Ryan Wallace is the guy who's over there doing that work. So they are collecting some of that data. So we will get some of that data as we're moving forward. I think he's got some of it now, but we're working to kind of figure out what is the impact really on small businesses, not only here in Maine, but kind of across the country. The SBA also does something out of their Office of Advocacy where they do a profile of small businesses across Maine. So when that new profile is generated, we'll get a sense of there were 147,000 small businesses on the last profile. We'll see how many are going to be on the profile that they generate next year. Unfortunately, there are too many that have closed.
Right. I wonder if anyone else who offers assistance to small businesses, do you have a sense of either a percentage, or are there particular segments of the economy that you think have been really knocked for a loop and businesses have closed and are not likely to reopen?
I was just searching my notes. I had my hands on that stat last week, and unfortunately I don't right now, but I know that Commissioner Johnson, the commissioner of the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development, shared some stats around business closures in a recent briefing. I'm happy to find those and follow up. But there have certainly been a lot of business closures, particularly in those industries that were and are really dependent on tourism, and that count on the summer for a majority of their cash flow, and that weren't able to recognize that cash flow this summer.
Yes, I think once the state, it usually takes a couple of months for the state to reconcile all of the sales tax data, but they should be posting from the summer and then into the shoulder season sales tax for hospitality businesses, and that certainly will provide a comparison we can look at for how 2020 fared compared with 2019 or 2018 or whatever. And I'm pretty sure it's not going to be good news for people in the tourism industry this year.
Right.
We've got time for one more. My lender seems to be in control of when the loan forgiveness applications are available. I would like to submit my application soon, but the lender is not accepting applications. What to do in this situation?
So you recognize that the lenders are actually motivated to get these things forgiven and off their books as soon as possible, because these are very low interest loans on the books of the lender at this point. So they don't want to keep them on the books any longer than they have to. On the other hand, I think they're probably holding out for more simplified application process for their own in their own interest. So you can continue to encourage your lender. You're the customer, and say you'd like to get it processed, but it may be a policy issue at some lenders at this point.
I think Steve's absolutely right there. I mean, I don't think there's nothing that is currently forcing lenders to start accepting applications. I think they, like the rest of us, would love to see a simplified process, and they're certainly motivated to move forward, but there's nothing, like, as a customer, beyond saying, we'd really like to help you out by getting this done, there's not much you can do to force this process to move forward.
Great. Well, I think we're out of time. Are we out of time, Strawberry? I think we're out of time. Yes. Okay. Then let me just thank all of the panelists. You guys have been terrific. If we were doing this as part of our business breakfast forum, there would be thunderous applause right now, thanking you for sharing your expertise and your insight. I think it's really important. I'm so grateful that you all had such tangible advice and suggestions for small businesses. A reminder to the attendees, all of this information will be posted on our landing page after this event. And if I could just take a moment to plug an event coming up Friday, we're going to be doing our Like a Boss segment on Friday at 1 o'clock. And the person who Lisa DeSisto, our publisher and CEO, will be talking to is Liz Cotter-Schlacks. I think everyone knows her, the president and CEO of United Way of Greater Portland. And Strawberry is posting a registration link for that right now. So again, thank you to the panelists, thanks to our sponsor, thanks to everybody for attending, and good luck as we finish out this unprecedented year. Thank you.